Hey, my name's Drew. I'm an amateur runner here in Flagstaff, Arizona. I decided recently I'm going to start a podcast, and today I brought on my friend Tony G, Anthony Giandomenico. We work together both in technology, but we happen to both be endurance athletes. So I'll let Tony talk a little bit about himself for a sec. But yeah, my background is mostly running, and Tony, you're an Ironman. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So yeah, people just call me Tony G, and Drew is one of the only people that can pronounce my last name fairly decent. So you really appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I'm an old guy, I'm in my 50s, but been doing Ironmans, for quite a while now. I think I got 10 or so under my belt, and still going strong. I kind of figured, over time, eventually I'm going to be able to qualify, for Kona. We'll kind of see what happens there. But yeah, kind of same thing like you, right? I mean, in the cyber industry and just trying to make it all work. I know your father, your husband. I'm the same thing, and just trying to fit it all in.
Yeah, and that's actually like one of the themes of I guess it's the theme of my new YouTube channel is I really want to help out people who are like me, really people who are like me about 3, 4, 5 years ago
Mm.
when I started running, and just apply some of the things that I've applied over the years and things that have helped me progress. And so that's what I want to talk to you about. So I guess
Cool.
before we talk about more about your Ironman experience, could you tell me about your running
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah,
Back
I
to the
mean
beginning.
yeah. I mean, that's really where it started, right? I mean, I remember being in high school. It must have been, I don't know, maybe 11th grade or something, and we used to, get a ride over to the mall. My mom and dad would kind of drop us off, and I remember one time, it was time to go home, and my mom and dad just kind of weren't there for a reason. I was like, well, maybe I'll start walking. Then I said, you know what? Let me see if I can run. Okay, I'll run walk, and next thing I know it's like 3 miles away. And that time I had never really run that far, and I was like, I got home, I was like, I just ran 3 miles, oh my God. And then that actual year I joined the cross country team, not because of running, because there was girls in there as well. You get into your kind of senior years, so I was kind of hanging out, and that's where it started. And I ended up kind of being fairly good runner. I mean, like, I think at one point I was able to do these 5Ks and sort of 16 something and what have you. I think I got like one down into the 15s, and just kind of went from there. I was just always a runner. Yeah, that's just a kind of natural runner.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's like these days, most run groups, I think they're just dating groups masquerading as run
Yeah,
groups. I don't know
yeah.
that anyone's actually runners who goes to those.
It's it's that motivation, man. It's always a woman.
Well, it's funny because I'm really jealous of people like you who have, an extensive background in running and endurance sports because I just didn't have that. I actually
You
took
didn't?
Accutane when I was in high school, and
Dang.
so if people ask me, "Oh, did you like running?" No, I hated it because my joints were just aching from the
Oh,
medication I was on,
yeah.
and I couldn't have even imagine running 1 mile, let alone like 26 or whatever, which I enjoy today. So it's funny. Yeah, I'm jealous that people who have that background have, they have all these benchmarks to look back on and things like a base for their training, which I've had to establish that a little later in life.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like I kind of feel that way now with kind of Ironman training, or just kind of like doing these Ironmans, because in the past it was like, back in the day when Ironman sort of first started, it's like you either kind of came from a running background, you came from a swimming background, or a biking background, and you just you excelled at one of them, and you just kind of did enough on the other two. You fast forward to today, and these kids are growing up as being triathletes, right? They're swimming, they're biking, they're running, they're good at everything. So yeah, these kids, I feel jealous. Back then, I wish I was, I wish I would have probably been born a little bit later to be able to catch that, Ironman kind of like triathlon craze.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've noticed with people that I work with from a coaching perspective, people who have a swimming background who still enjoy swimming or enjoy cycling as cross training. all
Yeah.
those things. That's part of the reason I wanted to bring you on, is because there's just so many commonalities between the running world and the triathlon world, and endurance training principles are all generally pretty similar. I think there's nuances to like what to do and when, and how much to focus on certain skills over others. But one thing that I try and do is just simplify everything, especially for since I started coaching. It's like, how do you make things, just boil it down so that people can really understand what you're talking about and apply it to their life in a way that isn't invasive and like throw them completely off track, and see those, those marginal gains over time, which end up being big gains, at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I dabble the Ironman coaching a little bit, and it's always I wonder if you kind of feel this way. It's like it's so important to get a good idea of where your athlete's kind of coming from, right? Because you say, a lot of times you want to be able to keep it sort of simple. I look at myself. I mean, I've kind of transformed to kind of keep it simple. I don't like all these like sort of numbers as an athlete, but now I'm at a point where give me the numbers, kind of give me, hey, kind of, do zone two in this and kind of do it for this amount of time. And you want to do this and do that. And, it's interesting to find, at the end of the day, I think you and I had this conversation about, you know, at the end of the day, kind of coaching is really about sort of soft skills, right? It's about just building a relationship, with your athlete. And if it works, it just works,
And if it doesn't, it doesn't.
it doesn't. Yeah, yeah. You just move on and
Yeah. I think the people stuff is so big. And that I think that learning that, the fact that coaching, my perception of coaching before I started was that, oh, give people workouts, they execute on the workout, you tell them how they did, you kind of just move on. But the reality is there's so much emotion involved in daily decision making and teaching people skills that they're going to be able to apply over time.
yeah,
And all of those daily decisions that they make are huge, because one thing goes wrong, and it's almost like if the train tracks just deviate just slightly,
yeah,
the whole train
yeah,
is going to derail,
yeah,
because it starts just a fraction of an inch can throw the wheels off. And I
yeah.
think that's what people struggle with when they, when someone's referred to me or whatever to just learn more about, how to get more out of themselves. They tell me about things that have gone wrong. They go, "Oh, I just had no idea what I
Mm,
was doing." Once they
yeah,
learn how to make those decisions, and it's huge. So I think the soft skills are huge, and it tells us a lot about the way that we should approach training
yeah,
generally.
yeah, yeah,
It's not just coaching, it's how am I supposed to be training myself too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And they all listen to you, right? When you tell them to do something, they do exactly what you say, right?
I'm not going to listen to
No,
myself.
yeah.
See.
No, no, that's the thing. It's like I do find myself kind of sometimes always trying to convince them why I'm telling them to do something. It kind of was very similar. I know we're getting off track here a little bit, but it was like, when I left my company, I had a small, like, concerted, con security consulting company for, for many years. And when I left that, kind of prior, when I said to do something, everyone's gonna do it. It's a small, and then I went to, this
Yeah.
larger company, and it was a big adjustment to where if I wanted someone to do something, I had to explain why it was the best thing to do, and you had to convince them.
Yeah. Well, if we take a step back, I'm curious how your initial running experience, because you were younger, you're running hammering fast 5Ks in high school, looking fit, feeling fit. How do you take that and you go, oh, I want to do something else. I want to do triathlon. Like, what point in life did that happen, and how did that kind of shape your training going forward?
Yeah, well, I'll kind of say this. The idea was put into my head, when I was in the Marine Corps. I was stationed out in Honolulu, Hawaii, and we had just kind of gone over. We were doing a mission over in the Big Island, and it was the towards the weekend. It was like maybe sort of a Thursday, Friday, and all of a sudden we were voluntold that we needed to help this thing called the Ironman kind of competition. So I ended up handing out sort of water bottles, and I just got so fascinated with it. I said, one day I want to do this. And I just kind of moved on. I sort of didn't forget about it, but it wasn't, kind of the first thing in my mind. It wasn't until I'm in New York City and I kind of met this guy who was kind of a runner, and he started doing some triathlon training, and I was like, okay, yeah, let me just start swimming, biking, running. And I kind of quickly realized that even when I was running, I had no idea, what I was doing, how I was supposed to train. I was just, at the time I was young and I was an athlete. And I would just get out there and run. It wasn't until I started doing multiple sports and getting a little bit more, serious into it, where I realized I got to put some structure around it. There's a whole thing around nutrition and hydration and all that stuff. So, they're definitely the things that kind of helped, I guess, was like I kind of knew, what my body could take, right? So I knew my I kind of felt, I felt my body. So I knew when I was going kind of too hard. I knew when I wasn't. As a matter of fact, it reminds me, I think you put something out recently, some kind of content around kind of knowing, how you feel. It's important to know, when you're feeling like you're going fast, when you're going at a moderate pace, what have you. I think that's where all that stuff started sort of triggering in my head, and it really helped me to be able to transition, I think, into into the triathlon, the whole sort of
Yeah.
Ironman stuff, and sort of triathlon. Even though I didn't know about sort of structured sort of training, periodization, all that stuff, I did know myself. I knew my body. I know when I was kind of going like fast, how long I could go at that, you know, without even like really realizing. And it's just because that's what I was. I was a runner.
It's interesting how people often associate like zone training with triathlon, but they don't. It's almost like, I don't know. I feel like there's this weird attitude toward talking about zones in running. People, pace is very. Um, it's just a great way to gauge how you're doing, and
Yeah.
it's kind of just the thing that is always going to tell you the best way to train. And things like the VDOT system and Jack Daniels, and they kind of created a formula for that. But what a lot of people don't do is separate, like, go off heart rate data very often. People,
Yeah.
I hear people say, oh, well, your optical heart rate on your watch is not good, thus you shouldn't do heart rate training. Well,
Mm.
it's not great. I agree. That's why I use a chest strap, and
Yeah.
I think that heart rate
Exactly.
training is perfect. If you're like me, you don't want to pay $250 for a lactate meter to
Nah.
get your
Yeah.
threshold training in. But what you can do is throw on a chest strap, do a few tests to find out where you are based on your pacing, and then
Mm.
if you're in good weather, your heart rate's going to be fairly accurate. If it starts getting warm, you might have to throw it out and go off a field. But I feel like knowing what zone you're in, like you were saying, knowing
Yeah.
what each effort feels like is huge, and using as many different data points as you can to
Yeah.
figure
Yeah.
out what
Yep.
those zones are like
Yeah.
is huge. Because then once you figure it out, you just take all of those different zones, you apply it to all your different sessions, and it can live in your head instead of having to be in an app or having a coach tell you.
Yep.
So I feel like zeroing in on that, it's not just a triathlon thing where you know which zones you're in all the time, and it's kind of more based off that because you're in multiple disciplines.
Yeah.
But running, I feel like it's pretty relevant as well.
Yeah. It just, I think, it's probably a couple of years ago where I just really wasn't. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, just like with running, you kind of gotta. I mean, even when you're kind of doing marathons, right, you gotta kind of push yourself a little bit. I mean, you got to get those higher, zone, kind of trainings in there and what have you. And I wasn't really kind of doing that. I mean, especially at my age, I was just kind of, you know what, I just kind of, like cruise, and that was great. I can finish these things, but the A-type personality in me was like, I want to get better. And I didn't realize until I started kind of doing these, these zone tests and what have you, these, FTPs, and just kind of seeing really, what can I really do? So I started, kind of really pushing it, and I kind of realized that my zones were just way too low, right? So I kind of shifted them a little bit, and
Hmm.
that changed the entire sort of training like ramp. It's changed my results. Kind of granted, I think at the end of the day, because I'm a runner, my body responded so much faster to that. The swimming and the biking, that's not really kind of where I came from. So, because I wasn't kind of doing that, my body wasn't used to that. It's not adapting as kind of quickly, but I am actually getting a lot better than when I was before because I am kind of pushing a little harder.
I know. So in addition to the added intensity, you've told me about doing more like speed work, strength work. You're in the gym more. You look pretty good for your 38-year-old age group, Tony.
Yeah,
It's
I just hit the 28, kind of 29 thing, right? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, 35 and under for
Yeah.
Boston.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like where I'm going with that is how do you see the strength component influencing where you were at before and then
Mm.
going into like a heavy strength block and speed and high intensity? How do you see yourself coming out of that? Because I know you're gearing up for a race coming here soon.
Like, how do I sort of, transition it out, or how? I mean, how is my body responding since I'm doing that type of training?
The latter.
Yeah,
How are
ladder.
you responding to it, and do you feel like it's
Yeah.
an effective way to get faster and
My
stronger?
God. First, everybody at every age, I really feel, should be doing this strength training. I mean, it just helps, from an injury, perspective, and then it's amplified as you start to get older. I mean, I'm an older athlete in my 50s. I mean, I still feel like I'm in pretty good shape, but I can definitely see my muscles they're not, where not how they used to be, right? So, getting that actual strength, training in, I remember when I wasn't doing it, I was doing all this kind of heavy volume, and you're supposed to feel good, right? You're supposed to feel healthy. You're supposed to feel sort of fit. I didn't feel that way. I just felt very sort of loose in the cage, and I was just tired. Started getting into a bit more of the strength training, and it kind of, it tightened me up a little bit, and I think it allowed me to be able to recover faster with some of that actual speed work. Where before, if I did that sort of speed work, I mean, I can keep up with some of these younger kids, but it's going to be about a week or so until I am able to recover. And I think that's the biggest thing. I've gotten a little bit better on being able to recover. And now I'll take that statement back. I probably can't keep up with you, Drew. You're a little bit too fast for me, but a lot of the other guys, I can maintain a decent sort of pace, but I'm out for a few days if I do that. So the strength training has really helped me, be able to maintain, less injuries, and also being able to, being able to recover faster. It's interesting though, because in my earlier blocks, if I'm just, kind of like starting a training ramp, and I don't know, maybe it's 8 months out or whatever, I'm doing more of the heavier stuff. Um, and I'm doing sort of less reps and what have you to get sort of stronger. But as it kind of gets sort of closer, I definitely realize I can't kind of do that anymore. So I kind of come back down to a little bit more of the, lighter weight, kind of heavier rep stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I asked you about the strength training and strength and speed. I think go together.
Yeah.
Power
Yep.
and
Power. Yeah.
strength. And I asked you that because I figured out over the years, over my like 5 years of running, it's not much, and I'll always be the first one to admit that I don't know everything. I've started this channel to just kind of bring all the information, like I said at the beginning, bring it to the old me,
Yeah. Yeah.
people who are
Yep.
like the old me. But I figured out that when people are in marathon blocks, and this included me for a little while, and they feel like they're not progressing, or the progression is kind of negligible for the amount of
Mm.
work that they're putting in. The one thing that I was really missing was I wasn't dedicated to strength because I didn't have the luxury of what I have now, where I have a full weight rack in my garage. So I've basically got a full
Yeah.
gym setup in my garage, which was like a dream of mine for a long time. Finally
That's
made it happen.
awesome. Yeah.
So I can get at least 3 strength training sessions in per week, if not 4. Most runners, I'd say, struggle to get 1 to 2.
One. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
if you're in a if you're more of a serious runner. So, or if you're not a professional, and because the amount of time that you have to dedicate to your
Mm.
running and to your training, it's so much if you want to perform at a high level. the strength training seems to be the first thing to fall off, but
You
it's
fall
also the
off.
first thing that you have to add in when you get injured.
Yeah.
And so I figured out, like, after a bunch of injuries, I'm like, gosh, I feel like I'm just getting injured. I'm run down. I'm losing weight. Like I would just lose
Exactly.
weight
Hmm.
constantly. Um, Now, I supplement with creatine in addition to having a high protein diet, and I lift, like I said, 3 to 4 times a week, depending on my running volume.
Yeah.
As I'm getting closer to marathon, I might pull that back to twice a week just so that I
Yeah.
can get the running volume in, but I'm not going to cut it. And
Yeah.
what I'm doing is not going to be really, really light, tons of high reps. It's going to be consistent,
Yeah.
just kind of
Consistent. Yeah.
maintain.
Yep.
And I try and get a lot of the heavy stuff done in the beginning because
Yeah.
then
Same
that
here.
gives me the power and the strength that's going to carry me through the block when I'm really trying to go high volume and do more like marathon stuff, or for some people it might be a half marathon depending on your times. So
Yeah. I mean,
I
I think
find
that's
it
important.
huge for
Okay.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's important. I mean, I think how both of us were sort of saying this. It's like, I call it like, I think, that's all I've been, this sort of, tagline. It's kind of been said before, but, strong before long. I almost feel like you gotta, when you're getting in there, get strong first and then start getting into some of the longer distances and the volumes. And I think that's the sort of approach that I take now. Getting into all of my Ironman training, what have you, is I get strong and I get sort of fast in the beginning, and then I kind of increase my my volume. I think sort of sometimes it kind of used to be sort of opposite where you just you slowly kind of like built up long, and then as you got to maybe a few months out of of your race, what have you, you started doing more sort of speed work where I kind of go the opposite. I want to get sort of strong. I want to get sort of fast, and then I start kind of building in that that volume because I think for me, if I can get stronger and I get sort of faster, that actually means that my my zones are moving, right? So now my body can handle those types of zones, and now I can apply that to the volume, and it's a world of a difference. The results are so much better for me.
It's funny you say that your zones move, because just the other day, yesterday, I did my first like normal threshold session of this marathon block. I'm about 10 weeks out from my Berlin marathon. Um, been doing for the last, I guess, since like mid-May, probably early to mid-May. I've been doing mostly strength and speed. So
Hmm.
that's, like I said, like 3 to 4 weight sessions a week, depending on what I'm training. I mostly don't really train upper body, mostly lower body and some like compound exercises. And the speed stuff is everything from like short reps and high intensity up to moderate
Yeah.
length reps and high intensity. So that's like speed stuff from like 1,500-meter workouts. So, you know, really fast 200s, 300s, 400s, 600s,
Yeah.
up until like a VO2 max session, which might be multiple kilometers,
Mm.
or something that puts me in the range of like 3 to 5 minutes in a rep. But I'm doing several of those reps with like a decent amount of rest, and heart rate's very high and intensity is really high. So I moved from that to doing my first threshold session yesterday, and I was doing kilometers on my usual route that I do, but the Ks were like way faster, and I felt just way more comfortable. My stride was better, my foot strikes better, and I just felt like I was just able to like not push very hard, stayed in a really healthy zone, and I was a good 5 to 8 seconds faster per mile pace than I
Wow.
was last year at this time.
Wow. Yeah. 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 That's a great use case, man. It's a great example.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I happened to me too. The other thing that at the same time, this was, where I live now. I live in a place, Alpine Road, in here in California, and it's a nice little sort of trail I have, but it is sort of like a slight kind of incline. So after a while, I do that all the time for my for my running, and not really realizing it until last weekend I went on the track and I was kind of doing some work there, and the same results. I was just like, darn, It's like I was looking at my watch. I'm like, no, that's not right. There's no way I'm doing that.
Wrong zone.
And I was like this is awesome, man. I'm freaking
Yeah.
flying, and I'm freaking not even feel like I'm breathing. So
It's funny you mentioned the hilly trails because um, when I moved to Flagstaff, prior to that, I didn't really run hilly stuff. I kind of avoided them. I ended up like a few times I got like Achilles issues and my calves. I carry a lot of um, just stress in my calves when I run. So like,
yeah,
a lot of runners, some runners, their hips will get very tight. Some carry it in their hamstrings and their glutes. For me, calves are always tight. So I avoided hills at all
okay,
costs. Since being in Flagstaff, now my daily runs, I'll get between 400 and 1,000 feet of elevation gain on an
damn,
easy run. And just watching like at the beginning the amount of like mental strength it took just to get up and down my daily runs, it's
yeah,
exhausting. And then now it's completely different. I just thoroughly enjoy it. I slow down a lot, but at the same time, I feel just so much aerobically so much better because the impact is low. I'm running on like sandy, soft dirt most of the time.
yeah,
Ankles are very strong because of that sand. You have to do a lot of stabilizing, and I do strength for that. So I feel like what it's taught me is a lot of times you have to just hone in on what are those weaknesses and just drill into them and keep
yeah,
doing things that focus on the weakness and then get strong in that area and then just figure out what that next weakness is, you know?
yeah. Totally agree. No,
Yeah.
that's good stuff. Hey, yeah, you didn't mention anything about the altitude where you live, right? I mean, that had nothing to do with your, fitness, right?
It's I mean, I'm always here. So, a lot of professional runners, they'll drop down to, people go down to Camp Verde and they'll do workouts at 3,500 feet for the high intensity stuff. Then they come back, sleep in Flagstaff.
Yeah,
From a scientific standpoint, it's great. From being a dad and working full time and being a husband, it's not great. So, uh,
yeah,
it's not often I can convince my wife to let me go and, work out for a 2.5 hour, 2.5 hour long run here in Flagstaff, let
true.
alone
Yeah,
driving an hour each way, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
But
Good
like
point.
for people curious about altitude, that is ideal in a lot of cases. Like that's one of the best things about Flagstaff and why so many people come train here is because you can sleep at 7,000 feet or higher if you go up the mountain. You can do long runs up here as well, which is great. But then if for high intensity, you drop down to Sedona, Camp Verde. Even if you want to go to Phoenix, it's only two
Yeah,
hours to Phoenix,
yeah.
and you get tons of really good stimulus. Then you come back up, and your body just keeps cranking out those red blood cells, and
That's
it's
awesome.
like it's
Yeah,
it's legal doping, except it's
yeah. I
really
love
cheap,
it.
and you have to do a lot of work, and
Yeah,
everyone can do
love it, love it.
it.
Cool.
Yeah. So, but, I mean, we're both, like we mentioned, we both work. We have families, we're both married with children. How has that kind of shaped your training, and how do you look at training as a core piece of your life?
Yeah, kind of people always ask, how do you, what's the hardest part about, Ironman training, what have you? And it's, honestly, I mean, anybody can, kind of, sort of train and finish an Ironman. That's just, I mean, you're just going to put the training in and then you eventually can finish and, it's great. It's just finding the time, man. There's only like so much time in the day and you got to kind of fit it all in. And, I think you have to, if you're going to continue to do it, it has to become a lifestyle. If you're just, okay, I'm just going to do, some stuff here and I'm going to go back to normal again, it has to just become part of your daily routine. Like if I know I have a work meeting, I have it in my calendar. If I know I have a workout session, that's got to be in my calendar and I got to be able to make
Yeah.
it, but at the same time, I got to be flexible enough to be able to adjust it. And then, you talk about the travel. I think we both do travel. It's a little bit more sort of process and sort of thinking, okay, I'm going to stay at this hotel, but does it have a pool? And if I can't bring my bike, does it have an actual, at least a stationary bike that I can get on? And what quality of bike is it? And then if there's not a pool, where's the local Y? Is there something else? So there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes into kind of picking out exactly, where you're going to stay. So I'm sure you're the same way.
I love that you mentioned that, dude, because I literally I traveled to Portland for a trade show a while back, and I decided it was one of my first videos I made on this YouTube channel, which I started in February. It's now July. So, doing a lot of learning and putting stuff out there, but that video, I specifically talked about that, it was like a huge part of the process is selecting where I'm going to stay. Most
Yeah.
people, they go, oh, I'm going to stay at this conference center. I'm going to be, I'll just go down 2 floors. I'll be in the conference center, go
Yeah.
to my conference, do the sessions. I'll meet with some customers. Then I'll go back up to my room. I'll go to sleep. But for me, I stayed, back behind in the hills behind downtown because it's right next to the trails. And I can wake up at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
and I can go for an hour and a half run, and I can come back. Or the day one when I got there, I had to go set some stuff up at the conference center, so I ran there and I got my run in
Yeah.
that way. And then
Nice.
I used to live in Portland. I love town, so it was kind of nostalgic for me too. But that part's huge. Like if you're not selective about when you do your sessions, how
Yeah.
you do them, the environment you put yourself in to enable that to happen, it's not a lifestyle, And so many people, they get into running. I want to lose 15 pounds before the
Uh,
summer. If I run every day and get my steps up, I'll be able to
mm,
drop some weight. But the people I'm trying to talk to are the people who are going for those like really small marginal gains over
yeah.
time. And they want to stack up and they want to be a better athlete over time.
Yeah.
And it takes tons of consistent work, and the consistency means it's got to be a core part of your life.
Yep. Totally. Totally, man. It's like, and yeah, I remember when I was, really wanting to get faster, and I was, I kind of coach myself now, but when I had some kind of coaches, and I was just, okay, well, I'm at this time. I'm looking for here this year. I mean, I want to get here. How do you get me here? What do I got to do? And he's just like, to be honest with you, Tony, I mean, I can get you there. But he's like, look, I got athletes that are your age, and it took, 3 or 4 years for me to get you there. But I know I'll get you there. It's just going to take time. And he was like, consistency, consistency, consistency. I think we always talk about that. It's like everybody wants to get, and this is a kind of a mindset for me now because it totally kind of changed. Everybody wants to get these really good quality sessions in. You just can't do it. I mean, when you're living life, you just can't do it. But what you need to focus on is just that consistency. Even if you get out there, that session was shit. It doesn't matter. You got out there, you kind of did it, that's okay. And maybe you'll have a string of those shit sessions, but that's okay because you'll kind of bounce back and you'll start having some quality ones. And it's all about the consistency. And, we talked about this as well. It's like, you may start thinking, oh, God, I don't want to do this workout. It's going to be a freaking shitty one. And then once you get into it, something happens, the endorphins kind of kick in, and next thing you know, it's like the best freaking workout. So the
Yeah.
advice is just get out and just freaking move forward and do it.
Yeah. Well, I was recently listening to a podcast. I don't recall whose it was. Oh no, it was the Sweat Elite podcast. So friend of mine, Matt Fox, he runs the Sweat Elite YouTube channel. Fantastic content. Go there. But he had Ryan Hall on, and Ryan was talking about how most people fear workouts, especially with the marathon. A lot of people fear the marathon. That's one of the biggest setbacks that people have. And the best way to deal with a workout is, this is according to Ryan, is just take a step back, be as present as possible, and just deal with one rep at a time. And don't think about, if you have like 14 400s that your coach wants you to do, and they're relatively fast, and it's going to be challenging, think about number one, then get to number two. And then before you know it, you're halfway through your workout. Maybe you have a 3-minute break between each rep of, each set. And then you get into the next set. And before you know it, you've completed something that you thought was really hard. I actually prescribed someone a VO2 max workout the other day. She came to me, goes, "You really think that I should do that? That seems really hard." And I had just asked her to listen to the podcast with Ryan Hall, and I was like, "Don't listen to me, listen to Ryan Hall."
That's
And
great.
she crushed the workout the next day. So
See?
it's not just, it's not just me saying this. It's like you hear it all the time, being present, just staying focused on what you're doing. and stacking those days. And I think if you don't think about if you just think about the long term,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to just get through each day instead of only thinking about the long term. But your goals should be long term,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So how are you going to
Good
get
point.
there? You stack those individual days,
Yeah.
but how are you measuring progress over the long term, not each day?
Yeah. That's exactly what it is. I mean, it's like it's really, and that those kind of principles really apply to everything, man. Like whatever you're trying to do, whatever your goal is, I mean, when you look at it, it's overwhelming. If you look at it as a big, but just take, one step at a time, man, and just kind of break it up into parts. And it's the same thing kind of when you're doing your race, right? I mean, you probably hear a lot of, psychologists talking about, kind of break up the race into different chunks. And like you said, next thing you know, you got a few miles to go, and you're almost going to finish the darn thing. So,
So it's funny because anytime I talk to a friend, I always think of all these podcast quotes because I'm a big like podcast listener. I load things onto my Garmin, which love Garmin. What is it? 265. Like I load on podcasts in the morning before my run, listen to podcasts while I'm out in the woods by myself.
yeah.
But one of my favorites is from a guy, Alex Hormozy, and he says, "You've already achieved things that you said would make you happy." And I think in
Mm,
training, not just life. I mean that rings true in life for me, but in training, just it reminds me take a step back, think of all the goals that you've achieved over time. Like for a long time, I was like, there's no way I'm going to break 17 minutes in a 5K, or there's no way I'm going
yeah.
to break 3 hours
Yeah.
in a marathon.
Yep.
And then it came so much faster than I expected because I just put in the time. I was learning from the mistakes I was making.
Yeah.
And I never would have imagined I would like to break 15 minutes in a 5K within the next few years. Or I want to, this year I want to run under 2:30 in the marathon. That's like it would have blown my mind back then
Yeah.
and now because I've just been I don't even really think about the times. It's just like where am I at physically? What
Yeah.
can I do to get better over time?
Yeah.
And it's just been huge and it's a big confidence thing for me because I never had the confidence. So having the confidence to say I've done all these things and it's all because of me. It's not because somebody else came and did the work.
Mm.
I'm accountable, just like I'm accountable for all the mistakes I've made, and I've made thousands of mistakes all the time. So I feel like giving yourself credit but also putting things into perspective and saying, I've done things that I said were going to make me happy. So I can be happy about those, but I can also think about how achievable those next things are, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. That's spot on, dude. Yeah, that's super good advice. Ah,
Yeah, well, this
cool,
this has been
man.
good, man. Hey, I
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on, Tony.
Yeah, I was like, shoot, I can continue to. It's just like we're just kind of hanging out. We could have a couple beers, and after 3 or 4 beers, our aspirations get higher and higher. Our accomplishments get higher and higher.
Our desire to start our own businesses gets higher and
Ah,
higher.
yes, yes, yes. We're gonna conquer the world.
Yeah,
Awesome, man.
well, coming up soon, I'll just mention to anyone who's watching or listening, we are going to bring on an athlete that I'm coaching, and she was a runner, and she's now transitioned to triathlon. She did her first 70.3 recently, so we're going to discuss what that transition was like, how we took running fitness and turned it into Ironman fitness, and she's now considering doing a full Ironman, which is awesome. And she's also doing another 70.3 coming up here in a month. So,
Dang,
um, you know,
crazy.
addicts are made very quickly in the triathlon world. I've noticed.
Yeah, it's funny if you ever have to ask someone, why do you do it? They're never gonna understand.
Runners are the same way. Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on, Tony. For anyone listening, thank you for watching, listening. Like and subscribe. Share this with your friends, and I'll see you next time. Happy running.
All right, man. See ya.